So thank you all for tuning in today. Today is I'm going to present my astrological weather report for the lunar cycle from May 22nd to June 21st of 2020. So why do I keep expecting Rod Serling to step out from behind the curtain? There's a little question that we are not only passing through the most dramatic times in our own lifetimes, but perhaps one of the most significant periods in history. The catalytic planetary parade continues as the eclipse season begins, or began with the Gemini new moon on May 22nd, 2020, last week. The full moon point of this lunar cycle will be a penumbral lunar eclipse. And near the end of the cycle, on June 8th, Mercury stations retrograde, joining Venus and the heavy outer planets already in backward cycles. So this lunar cycle began with the Gemini new moon last week. I couldn't get a slot last week. I wasn't ready to do this. I apologize. Next month I will be here for you on the new moon. But the new moon occurred at 2 degrees of Gemini, and it set the tone for the month to come. So I would like to walk through this chart because it is the foundational archetype of what we're experiencing, and the next 3 lunations that I'm going to talk about will all refer back to it. So at this lunation, we had Pallas Athena, Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto all synchronized in backward movement. And they're learning to adapt, like we are, to the transition between Capricorn and Aquarius. We're moving back and forth between those 2 archetypes, which are clearly quite significant, not just for the present, but for the near and far future. The powerful outer planet conjunctions have crumbled, torn down institutions and things that we thought were too big to fail. The great conjunctions, Pluto's transit through Capricorn, have brought tremendous pressure on our planet, on our culture, on our individual lives. And now what's happening is that our own personal lives are being deconstructed. We're struggling for control of the present because our habitual way of behaving is really being stripped away. Excuse me. I've spoken about this before, but Pallas Athena has been quite instrumental throughout this entire process. She has been weaving back and forth through Capricorn, moving faster than Pluto and Jupiter and Saturn, and interacting with all of them, interweaving back and forth, passing her messages, passing her strategies, passing her overview to these outer planets, and embedding them in these great conjunctions that have occurred since January and will continue to occur really through the end of this year. We're just about halfway through the year, not quite there, and this eclipse season is coming at us hard and strong, coming up pretty fast, right on top of all these other crises that we are experiencing. Saturn retrograde in Aquarius is pressuring the moon to radically alter the basic structure of her nature. We're getting pressure to change the way we see ourselves, to change our behavior, to change the basic structure of our lives and our emotional nature. And in order to be able to deal with this and perhaps other events that may be on its tail that we don't know about yet. Basically, the past and the future are struggling for control of the present. We are tied to the past for the choices that we've made, and the future now is no longer shimmers. We're not even sure what it looks like. It's very much been very much harder to perceive. We're part of the deconstruction. But Pallas Athena in retrograde, as she moves away from out of Aquarius and away from Saturn and back into Capricorn, it's possible that we could see that her shield of protection is weakening. We know that she was mythically, she was the protectress of Athens, and her shield is an important part of her mythology, with the Aegis on it, with the Gorgon's face, Medusa's face, and but it's been suggested, Dimitri George is really very prominent talking about it right now, that her shield is protective, and there is some sense of that we do have some protection celestially, if we can embody it and work with it. But in her retrograde, it's possible that it is weakening a bit, and I'm concerned. I think many of us are concerned as we try to get back to normalcy and businesses reopen and beaches reopen and casinos and restaurants reopen, that we aren't moving into a space where we're really stepping out from behind the shield of sheltering in place that we have created for ourselves, and perhaps generating consequences that we will have to deal with as these eclipses unfold through the rest of this year. But she is still informing us, and we are hearing her messages, but these messages are confusing and they're difficult to decipher. We're getting a lot of mixed messages in the media, and we don't know what's true and what's not true. It's really about learning to trust our own intuition and to listen to the higher messages that we're getting on our own. The moon makes a hard left turn, makes a square with Mars in Ceres. And so we can expect some harsh words. We can expect expressions of profound uncertainty and loss. Ceres, correlating to where we have experienced our deepest personal loss. And searching for it. We're looking for surrogates for what we have lost. We're looking for ways to somehow recover what is gone. And we're hoping Hecate will show up and raise her torch at the crossroads and show us which way to go. What are the choices that we have made? This is Mars. Mars is about our choices. And what are we still making that have resulted in these new realities that we're facing and will have to face in the future? Mercury, who's the ruler of the lunar north node, is in his own native rulership of Gemini, is spelling out the underlying message of this lunar cycle. He's basically laying out the parameters of what this is going to be all about. And his impending meetup with Venus, Hygeia, and Vesta going forward through this month sets the stage for focused discussion seeking proactive, holistic healthcare alternatives. He's working very hard to build an agenda towards healing, towards the remedies that we need, through our authenticity, through our commitment to ourselves, and through our priorities and values in Venus, to really get through this. It's really what this is all about, and this is the reshuffle. At the end of the month, he's going to meet up with the lunar north node, which he rules, and which will actually finalize the current agenda. He will turn retrograde, as I said, later on in the month, and come back over Vesta and Hygeia, but he will not, Vesta and Venus, but he will not meet up again with the North Node. It's going to be a one-shot deal, in which he's just going to basically sign the contract and move forward. And Pluto is part of the game as well. Pluto adds considerable weight to the struggle for us to understand why the world is rupturing like it is, pulling us down into our subconscious to examine what we think is true, and showing up as the conflict of impassioned belief systems that clash against each other with such unpleasant consequences. So this is the undertone, the base note of what this month is going to be about. And all of the aspects that we're going to talk about, and the lunations especially, are all going to point back to these issues in one way or another. So we're at the first quarter moon, even as we speak. The first quarter moon is tomorrow night in Washington. And Dan Rudger called the first quarter a crisis in action. And how do we achieve the understanding and reconciliation of these current events? How do we fulfill what was promised at the onset of this cycle, to understand what is happening and to be able to reconcile them? And it's a crisis because we've come a quarter of the way and we're still no further along in many ways, except for, having the false belief that we can all go to the beach again and everything's going to be the way it used to be. The moon squares Venus, Gemini retrograde. We have both Venus retrograde and Mercury retrograde. This talk is not really about those retrogrades. There's certainly enough information out there with all the specifics, about those two issues, but they are very prominent this month in the way that they are reacting, and I'll touch upon them. So our priorities are questioned. To me, Venus is priorities and values. It's really what's important to us. It comes down to, in many ways, not just our relationships to others, but it's our relationship to ourselves through our own self-worth, through what we think we deserve, through what our values are, through what it is that we think we can achieve. And this is all coming out on the table. The moon opposes Mars, Ceres, and Neptune in Pisces. This is quite a stellium, Pisces stellium, that will really be active through the entire month. There's a lot of acting out emotionally going on. People are just need to get out and speak their minds. They need to, they can't keep it in anymore, for whether we agree with how they feel, what their beliefs are, what their perspectives are, and what's happening. People are out there expressing it, and it's part of this Gemini, need to talk about it kind of element. And we've also got this savior and martyr thing going on. To some degree, people are looking to connect with, other like-minded martyrs, people perhaps who are suffering the same deprivation of their personal freedoms, or having to go out and wear the mask, or not being able to go to a restaurant, kind of, letting themselves, be submerged into that emotional abyss of the loss. And also looking for the savior. Will Bill Gates actually come up with some vaccine? Will we have to take it? What's down the road? Is somebody going to come and save us? When in reality, this is all about us saving ourselves. If we had been our own saviors, through the past, and we're sick, or we wouldn't have to worry about it, because the only people who are really suffering from this disease are those who are already vulnerable. Not to say that we can't get sick, but it doesn't mean we're going to die from it. But we still have to be careful. 100,000 people have died so far, and that's not an easy number to live with. And we're driven to find spiritual sanctuary. It's also driving us spiritually inward and upward, into our higher self and into what's most important in our lives, which is that which is greater than us. There's a partile trine. There's three partile aspects in this new moon. The partile trine to Uranus and Taurus is that need to express that individuality. I thought that Uranus and Aries was difficult enough, with people being out there with all this, inspired self-expression, but everybody's hunkered down in it, in this very Taurus, behind their emotional walls, and kind of taking pot shots at people and events. So this is, this Taurus energy is very, very prevalent. And there's a partile sesqui-square to Pluto and Capricorn, which is adding karmic stress. Again, it's stuff from the past, recent past, far past. It's coming back to, and raising its head in essence to haunt us, and let us know that this stuff has just been shoved under the rug. And now that the rug has been pulled out from under us, it's all being exposed. And a partile quintile to Vesta, I think, is interesting. I don't really spend a lot of time with the quintiles, but when it's partile, we have to look at it. And Vesta is about our commitment to ourselves and to our authenticity. And this quintile adds a creative flair and a uniqueness to the expression of all this individuality. Mercury, who is the ruler of the sun and moon in this chart, has just ingressed Cancer. So Mercury is having to navigate this shift from air to water. So for him, it's harder to breathe, and his movement is slowed down, just slow motion through the water, and perhaps caught in cross currents and riptides. Asteroid Juno, particularly interesting, has been the bucket of this chart, for many, many months now, except when the moon made her way through this western portion of the chart, and she has finally stationed direct 3 days ago. So, I'm wondering if, Juno is about gender equality, it's about power sharing in general. Perhaps we can expect Joe Biden to announce, the woman who will be his running mate in the next few days or a week or so. Interesting to watch. So we have Venus retrograde squaring Mars, and I chose this aspect as significant because of Venus retrograde cycle that we're in. Venus and Mars are the star-crossed lovers, if you would. So their relationship through this Venus cycle is quite important, and the square certainly does not relieve any of the tension in this retrograde cycle. If anything, it adds to it. But there is some salvation here as well. Venus retrograde, as I said, there's a lot of material out there, but it's about relationships and priorities in general under review and revision. It's a time when we can look back at a relationship with ourselves, a relationship with others, a relationship to our work and to the world, to our neighborhood, to everything around us, and to rework it where we see it needs to be reworked. Venus is conjunct to Gemini Sun, which brings the focus to personal self-expression, where these new understandings and this review is going to be part of how we're expressing who we are in the world. And it's also going to come forward as a need for personal safety. The sesqui square to Jupiter retrograde, again, adds pressure. Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn, pressure is a word really that applies to all of them. They are weight. They weigh down upon us in one way or another. Jupiter expands, so the pressure is, like a balloon being inflated, to the point to which it cannot take any more internal pressure. These are some of the things we're going through. And as these retrogrades occur, the Western astrology likes to say that perhaps the retrograde is a diminishing effect. I'm going to assert that the retrograde actually intensifies the archetype as we go inward and backward, through these events. And there's a sesqui square as well to Saturn. So here the pressure is for change and a pressure from change. We're feeling it both ways. We want changes. We need a change, but we're under tremendous pressure, from the changes that we're experiencing. So we're getting it from two different vertexes, two different directions. And there's a partile sesqui square as well to Pallas Athena. She's speaking to us. Are we hearing what she has to say? Are we listening? Are we acting on the messages we're hearing? So there's three parts to it. The listening, the hearing, and the actual the action. We need to listen to that inner goddess voice that we all have. Mars in Pisces is conjunct Ceres and Neptune. I touched on that already. We're exploring a whole new territory of our subconscious. Not that we haven't gone there, but it's being opened up in new ways. This pandemic is kind of like a subconscious can opener. And we're being, shown what the interior of it, whether we want to look at it or not. And we're searching for what's lost. This is Ceres. Ceres, spent, a lot of time looking for Persephone. I was unable to find her. Adopted a surrogate in her stead, hoping to, make the surrogate immortal, to have an immortal child again. This is kind of what we're going through. And we feel like we're navigating a deep abyss, and we're seeking spiritual sanctuary as a result. The square suggests, the lunar square itself suggests self-actualization towards universal love. And this is the kind of affinity that's here, because we have Mars conjunct Neptune and Venus conjunct Sun. Well, Venus conjunct Sun brings in that solar energy to Venus's expression. And Mars fire energy is connected to the higher octave, of Venus. So there is an inner affinity going on here in terms of the influences upon both of these planets, but they're both at the moment working to come to terms with the choices that we've been making and the priorities that we have going forward. The choices we've made in the past are clearly out of sync with the priorities going forward. So the full moon on June 5th occurs as a penumbral lunar eclipse. In 2 weeks, I'm going to do a much more expansive discussion of the eclipses and focus just on the eclipses themselves. But this eclipse is important because it is the full moon in June. A penumbral eclipse is when only a portion of the Earth's shadow falls across the moon. The good news here is that this eclipse and the solar eclipse in July, neither of which are visible across North America. It's not good news for everybody in Asia and Europe, but here in the United States, to some degree, could be spared the full brunt of the effect of this eclipse, though it's still going to be a very, very powerful new moon. Full moon. Our path has brought us to a precipice which is revealing a surreal landscape. What we're seeing up ahead is Twilight Zone. What we're moving through is Twilight Zone. It's hard for us to really understand it, get wrapped around it, and embrace it and embody it. And this is just the first of a series of eclipses to occur in Gemini and Sagittarius, which will span the next 18 months. The next 2 eclipses are going to be back in Cancer and Capricorn. So we're not quite done with all the Capricorn and Cancer energy. We've still got another 2 eclipses to move through it. In Sagittarius, the self-actualizing free fire element becomes self-realization. Okay, we're born in Aries. It's in in Leo. We come to recognize our own self and sense of our persona and be able to express it as who we are. But there's a self-realization process that occurs up with that 9th house as we connect to something greater than ourselves as part of the social sphere and part of the greater world. Sagittarius is going to cause the volume of conversations to clearly be amped up. We're going to hear lots of stories, lots of versions of the truth, because Sag is that search for truth. And this is going to be a bottom line for 18 months. What's true, what's not true. Freedom also is increasingly going to become an issue as more and more people express their own self-allowed freedom, sometimes without the regard for others. Mars draws both Sun and Moon into crisis. Mars is squaring both luminaries, T-squares. So Mars is really pulling in both directions. Any emotional abyss can deepen as Mars patrols on guard, if you would, between Ceres and Neptune. He's standing there between what we've lost and what we're seeking, and struggling to integrate and synthesize the two, and to bring the energy of Sun and Moon, back into balance at this full moon. Mars in Pisces presents guilt, regret, and a sense of loss, anger, resentment, and self-pity. Just for starters, we can feel emotionally weighed down by the consequences of our actions from the past, present, and what it is we're planning to do in the future. Because the future is here. It's in this moment already. In essence, past and future don't exist. It's only how we perceive them through this present moment. And how we're working with it is what changes the entire model. Saturn in this chart brings a new sense of responsibility to this post-mortem, which is really what's beginning to occur. Choices are going to be revisited as a result of the unfolding consequences. The timing of this is pretty close to the reopening of all these things. June 1st, a lot of restaurants and golf courses are open already. A lot of public places are going to be open. And what we're seeing happen is that all the social distancing is just falling apart. People are just so anxious to get back to normal. And history has shown, especially through the Spanish flu pandemic in 1918, that that the second wave was much, much greater, much more deadly than the first wave. So we could be seeing some very hard realities here as the number of daily cases, though they seem to be dropping at the moment because everybody has been wearing masks and social distancing, start to go up again dramatically. These experiences will, however, open a pathway for new choices. We're being forced to make new choices. I mean, that's really the bottom line here. It's why Mars is so significant in this cycle. We have to make some new choices. We have a choke chain reality right now where we can no longer make the same choice. That direction is just not available to us. And on June 28th, Mercury will begin the second of 3 retrograde cycles this year. He'll station direct again on the 12th, and he finally leaves his shadow in July on the 27th. And during this retrograde cycle, he's going to twice revisit Vesta and Hygeia, passing over them once retrograde and then direct again, embedding their prescriptions and their ritual practices into our intentions going forward, our potentialities for the future. So this is a highly potentiating, but lots of revelations here, and perhaps some difficult, choppy waters. The last quarter moon occurs on June 13th. It's a Pisces new moon, so the Pisces energy is going to kind of repeat, because now we have the moon in a stellium with Neptune and Mars, and though it does not conjoin Ceres, Mars is conjunct Ceres. So we have a pretty tight combination here, blending of these Piscean energies. Again, that I described of loss and needing sanctuary, seeking a savior, trying to aligning herself with other mortals, etc. It's what Dane Roger described the last quarter moon as a crisis in consciousness, where we've come to the point in the cycle, the 3/4 point, where we've come almost all the way around. And how are we going to close this circle? How are we going to resolve and accomplish what we set out to accomplish at the new moon? What was promised at the new moon? How are we going to realize that understanding and find the reconciliation and begin to work towards the remedies and the path forward, the safe path forward? But there's still a sense that there's a search for what is lost, and emotional distress about fast choices and future alternatives, and seeking safe harbor. The moon sextiles a retrograde Jupiter, pumps up our emotional reactivity, opens the space for new growth opportunities at the same time. A semi-square to Uranus and Taurus, I spoke about how important this is, really long-term. This is a 7-year transit. Potentials for individualized emotions, and again, publicly acting out, hunkered down, holding on to what they believe at all costs, and really partially responsible for the disruptions and interruptions we're seeing. Luckily, we haven't seen any protesters with automatic weapons on the state capitol steps in the past week or so. Sextile to Pluto, again, is more emotional pressure. These are the karmic underpinnings and the social pressures that we have planted ourselves that are coming home to roost. And the square to the lunar nodes, it's an imperative, the imperative to reconcile and understand the impacts and conflicts of past actions and future actions. This is something that I have written a lot about. It's in my 2020 Vision review of the year, and I've written a number of articles about it. This Pluto retrograde square Eris from Capricorn to Aries has not occurred in 2,700 years. And this is the second of three passes. This occurred in the Axial Age. This brought us Buddha, Zoroaster, Pythagoras, Hesiod, and the Upanishads were written. The Chinese invented printing, and the Mesopotamian power, which was the huge power shift of the time, transferred from Assyria to Babylon. This is a very, very, very powerful, slow-moving, impactful transit, and we're coming up to the second one with Pluto retrograde. It happened back in January, and it's going to happen again. And you know, Eris is highly misunderstood. Yes, she did bring about the end of she wrote about the Trojan War, but she also precipitated the end of the Greek classical age, which perhaps had come to the end of its growth cycle, and it had no other way to end. Eris has the capability of creating consciousness through chaos. Samuel Hahnemann is a beautiful example. He has Eris very, very prominent in his chart. He was very, very disillusioned with the way that medicine was being handled at the time when he was working. And he left the medical profession and actually went out on his own and just did a lot of different kinds of research. And he realized homeopathy, the idea that like heals like. And it was a tremendous, tremendous shift and a tremendous contribution to holistic medicine. And it all came about through Eris in his life, and the chaos and the disruption, kind of like Uranus. There's, I associate Eris with both Mars and Uranus in terms of the way that she can interrupt us and really create some discord in order to make us, re-examine everything. Chaos can have great benefit, because when we're confused, confusion, causes us to rethink everything, to dismiss what we think we know and begin to reconsider and rework, what it is that we know. So this is really powerful, and I would suggest that we watch this, and the third one that's going to come up at the end of the year, which will be around the time that Pluto also is conjoined with Jupiter. And Mercury retrograde, probably the best known transit of everybody who doesn't know anything about astrology knows about Mercury retrograde. Again, it's a review of what we think and what we think we know and what we're learning and how we observe the world and our self-narrative and our narratives to others. There's a trine, the trines to Mars, Ceres, and Neptune, again, brings the sense of loss and this anxiety, into this this retrograde cycle for Mercury. It brings it into our cognition, into onto the field of our what we're seeing and understanding. Pluto opposes Mercury retrograde, again, more karmic weight. Pluto is very, very active in all of these major aspects for the month. And the square to Chiron is going to be about how to find and effectuate these remedies, to actually do the work, to see what's the ideas, what's the knowledge, what it is that we can learn, from scratch, if you would, in order to come through this. With holistic healing, not necessarily with vaccines. There's going to be a lot of resistance from people if there's going to be required to be vaccinated. The conjunction to Vesta is going to necessitate authentic conversations. It's kind of like a Turk chain situation where we're not going to be able to speak something that's not true. Or when we hear something that's not true, I think it's going to ring false. There's going to be this authenticity that's going to permeate basically the zeitgeist that's going to allow us to begin to filter through what it is we're hearing and perceiving and begin to make our own choices and make up our own mind about really what's happening. And the spirit of Juno, as she moves forward finally, is going to begin to necessitate some gender equality and some power sharing in general. And it should really begin to show us, bring more of the feminine goddess energy, down, into a workable plane, so we can begin to move forward in a positive way. So these are the dates to watch. I've listed them all here for you, so you can have them to understand what's going on. Now, every month I have been doing forecasts and horoscopes for everybody, and I'm gonna say honestly, these just come to me somehow, and I will admit, maybe sometimes they're going to be spot on, and sometimes you're going to say what. So I suggest you kind of read this with your heart, maybe not your brain, or read them intuitively. I'm going to go through them with you, and you can listen to them as well for your rising sign and your moon sign, because all of the perspectives that are used for these horoscopes really came from a sign-centered perspective of each chart. So Aries, take a little drink of water here. Aries, the difficulty lies not so much in developing new ideas as in escaping old ones, but English economist John Maynard Keynes. How can we begin to imagine a new future when we haven't let go of beliefs that are still anchored in the past? How can we create a future based on the concepts of equality, proactive health care, and personal authenticity? These are some of the questions that you might ask yourself this month. For Taurus, a pile of rocks ceases to be a rock when somebody contemplates it with the idea of a cathedral in mind, wrote Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Is there a deeper worth to be found in life events right now? What is the greatest value to ourselves and to all beings everywhere? Please locate and sharpen your stone cutting tools and start sculpting. Gemini, breathe, pause, breathe, pause, look around. The world is in everyone's face right now, not just yours. Breathe, breathe. Just observe your thoughts as they move across your mind. They're only your thoughts. You are not your thoughts. Breathe, breathe, breathe. Cancer. If you are blessed to be in your own home, feel the blessing. There are many people right now living in RVs anywhere they can. Boats of all sizes are anchored offshore waiting to be allowed to dock. People are living out of their vehicles somewhere, anywhere they can, or in a homeless shelter. Let's give thanks and prayers for having safe sanctuary. Let us send prayers and blessings to those who are not as fortunate. Leo, to be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment, wrote Ralph Waldo Emerson. It seems like everything is magnetized right now. We are being stretched between how we personally want to express how we know ourselves and who others are expecting us to be. When identity is changing, we can feel that others don't know us and that to some degree we no longer know ourselves. Become the observer of your reality TV show rather than the actor. Virgo, I am guessing that whatever your chosen line of work, you're probably quite busy right now. Why do I say that? Because whatever you do probably inherently has to do with healing, either for other people or for something important in people's lives. Thank you for embracing your responsibility and proactive willingness to step up. Take a bow. You have earned it. Libra, is there something that you have wanted to study but never felt you had the time? Top universities around the world are offering free online college classes that include recordings of lectures to interactive courses with assignments and final projects. Prestigious schools such as Harvard, Yale, and MIT. You can also learn anything and everything from home repair to astrology. Imagine that. It could lead to a whole new way for you to meet the world face to face. Scorpio, the edge. There is no honest way to explain it because the only people who really know where it is are the ones who have gone over, wrote journalist Hunter S. Thompson. What we learn at the edges is that it is not an end, it's a beginning. You are navigating familiar waters, Scorpio. You have learned how to float. Sagittarius. Awaken the joy and sense of adventure in the hearts of others, Sag. Your generosity can flow by giving of yourself, your talents, your stories, your humor, your joie de vivre. Find the experiences during your day that fuel your heart fire. Your potentials are unlimited as your horizons when you find them. Capricorn. I suppose real old age begins when one begins to look backward rather than forward, said poet Mason. If the future seems uncertain, perhaps it is because there is a need to examine the past in order to find out why the present and future have gotten so wobbly. You have the time and planetary support. Go for it. Aquarius. Perfection is achieved not when there is nothing more to add, but when there's nothing left to take away, wrote Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. I love his quotes. Even the finest degree of artistic talent of craftsmanship must frequently be refreshed by the inner creative forge from which it sprang. A hot current of air blows now from that inner caldera that is your life's blood. Pisces. Who are you right now? Are you the 5D image of an idea that became a belief and then evolved into you? Is the idea behind that image still your own? Please consider that it might be time to eject that CD-ROM. Please let it not be an 8-track. So I write these transits and horoscopes. If you like it, if you like them, weekly, daily, monthly. I do dailies every day on Facebook. I do monthlies and weeklies on my website, and I also post them on my Facebook page. So I invite you to join me. Give me feedback if you like them, if you don't like them, if they work, if they don't work. I would love to hear from you. And namaste, stay safe, stay healthy, and thank you all for this opportunity to be here.
Great, thank you so much, Daniel. That was fantastic. Would you all please unmute and thank Daniel Fiverson?
Thank you, Daniel. That was wonderful.
Yes, Daniel. And I love to read you every day too.
Thank you.